In 2019, I attended my first in-person leadership retreat. I wasn't excited to go at first because, frankly, I prefer staying at home in my comfortable bubble. I went nonetheless, and on day 2 of this 2019 retreat, I had an epiphany that an in-person experience, disconnected from the world, in a setting that stimulates revelation is the key to complete leadership development. That is what I was experiencing. Since then, our Leading Saints team has been researching other retreats, and we are finally ready to offer our Gathering Saints retreat experiences. These are in-person getaways where we gather in a physical location around the world, disconnect from our busy lives, and take a few days to connect with God as we learn to develop as individual leaders. These experiences are for individuals with no official leadership title, and even those with a formal leadership role. These retreats typically take place in beautiful wilderness locations, and we are also organizing church history trips where we create developmental experiences in historic church settings like Kirtland, Nauvoo, and Independence. For more information about the next retreat, visit leadingsaints.org/gathering or click the link in the show notes. That's leadingsaints.org/gathering or click the link in the show notes. Hey, if you're a newbie to Leading Saints, it's important that you know, what is this Leading Saints thing? Well, Leading Saints is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping Latter-day Saints be better prepared to lead. And the way we do that is through content creation. So we have this phenomenal podcast, we have a newsletter, we have virtual conferences, so much more. And articles on our website. I mean, I could go on, right? And we encourage you to jump in, check out Leading Saints, go to the search bar at leadingsaints.org and type in some topics and see what pops up. We're just glad you're here to join us. Today, I have the unique opportunity of being in the same room with international voice here, John Deacon from, what do you say? I mean, Durham, UK, or where are you from, John?
So Durham in the UK.
Durham in the UK.
The largest city is Newcastle, which is about half an hour north.
And Newcastle, I mean, I guess everywhere is a big soccer town or football town. And they got a team. And
yeah, that's what they're mostly famous for. Apparently now they're the richest club in the world.
Really?
Across all sports, apparently.
Wow.
So yeah, that's Newcastle United. That's what they're famous for. But traditionally the shipbuilding, coal mining area, northeast of England. So about an hour from the Scotland border.
So, and we just had a wonderful lunch together. And so you're going to say a lot of things maybe you already said at lunch, but just pretend like we never went to lunch so that everybody can be circled in here. But sure. So why are you in Utah?
So we try and get across to, when I say we, my wife and 2 children, we get across as often as we can. We've got a lot of friends here. We've got some family in California. We like to visit. So it's usually just visiting friends, family here in Utah, taking in the sights, going to different temples, going to Moab and whitewater rafting and all that kind of fun stuff.
Cool.
So,
Awesome. And I love that your last name is Deacon. Obviously that's in the Bible and whatnot, but in our faith tradition, that's comes with a unique background to that. I mean,
yeah, I guess so. So we would often have that, as Deacon's Quorum President, and you're like President Deacon, and then serving in the state presidency, President Deacon, and how does that work? So there's a few people who may be new to the church thought that President Deacon was a title.
Oh yeah,
rather than just a title stroke name. So it is quite unique, I guess. Yeah.
Or when they say the deacons are getting rowdy at church, you're not sure what they mean.
Well, no, we knew exactly what they meant.
That's awesome. It reminds me of, and I think he was English. This was years ago. I interviewed, I forget the details, but his last name was Coffee. And I'm like, man, what a great last name for a Latter-day Saint. I think he was a convert too. So it's like, he was Bishop Coffee,
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. No, it's, it could have been elder. Serving a mission would have been interesting.
Yeah. Right. So, and you've served in the stake presidency?
Yeah. Served in the stake presidency in the Sunderland Stake from 2011 to 2020.
Nice.
So yeah,
nice.
9 years.
And you, as we were talking, you weren't a bishop before. You weren't in a bishopric. So
No.
what's the story behind you getting called to that role?
Yeah, so I hadn't served in a bishopric before. I served in the High Council before, Elders Quorum President, and various other ward-based callings. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it came along, and there was the usual interviews that were taking place, and I wasn't even being interviewed.
Because you weren't on the High Council at the time?
No, I was serving in young men's at the time in the ward.
So you had stake conference coming up, just another stake conference for you.
We knew things were changing, but that's not going to affect anything from our perspective. So I went to the leadership session, and then I just had a feeling on the way home, even though I wasn't part of the interview process, that my phone just had to be in my hand. And when it didn't ring, but when I got home, my wife was all dressed in her Sunday clothes. And she said, have you received a call? And I said, no, what do you mean? She said, we've got to go back up to the stake centre.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, oh, okay. So we went back up, and it was Elder Corset, now Bishop Corset, who was visiting at the time. And he said, you're and I can't do a French accent, but he said, your name has came up a few times in recommendations here, but you weren't on the list to be interviewed. So we wanted to speak to you and your wife. And so they did that. They asked my wife a really interesting question, which was, is your husband the same man in the home as he is at the pulpit? And I thought that was a really telling question.
Yeah, that's great.
Thankfully, my wife lied through her teeth and said that I was. And so then they called me as a councillor on the Stake Presidency, and that lasted for 9 years until October 2020.
Wow. So did you have much interaction with the stake president before that you served with?
Yeah, we knew each other. We were a similar age, so we were both young. He was 32, 33 at the time. Thankfully, the other councillor was an old hand and knew exactly what to do.
Keep you in line.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did. He really did. And so yeah, we knew each other beforehand. When we say a stake, it's not like maybe like you have here in Utah.
Nothing's like Utah, I'm afraid.
It's like Utah, yeah.
Thank goodness.
So, if you're an active priesthood holder, other active priesthood holders would probably know who you were as well.
Okay. And you probably had some type of leadership role, either in a presidency or bishopric or something at some point. Yeah.
People would always know who you were, or you would know them and things. So he had obviously recommended me, and apparently, according to Elder Corset, my name had came up a few times for my sins. Must have said a few things right in the gospel doctrine class once. And so, that was back in 2011. And spent 9 years together.
And what did that stake president, was he a bishop, or did he have much experience?
Yeah, no, he was bishop at the time he was called.
Nice.
And the other member of the presidency, he was on the previous stake presidency as well.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm always encouraged by stories like yours because sometimes, a new stake presidency or bishopric's called. And I mean, I think most of the ward could probably guess who's it going to be. And of course, I believe in the revelatory process and all that, but sometimes I think we default to really safe individuals who we know have a history of leading and that they're not going to do anything too crazy. So to say, hey, we're going to give John a go at this, and the inspiration's there, and you walk in there with not much experience, but can still do a good job. Right?
Yeah, maybe, and doing a good job.
Other than your experience.
Yeah. I think I came from a large family as well, Kurt, and I think my dad was a stake president back in the 1980s. So I think a few people may have just seen, well, this is President Deacon's son. Of course, he's a pretty good guy.
Yeah.
He wears a white shirt anyway. So maybe the thought along those lines. And actually just on that, I remember going in the MTC in London as a young missionary, and we stayed in the accommodation centre, and I think there was maybe 30 of us there. But the MTC president knew my parents pretty well. They were good friends. President Robeson, who was a track athlete, and my dad was a track athlete. And so they hit it off from a leadership perspective. And so when they found out that President Deacon's son is coming to the MTC, they thought, this is wonderful. This is going to be such a lovely, wonderful young man. And so I came along, and there was one night while we were there that we were playing cricket. Like baseball?
I've seen it in the movies.
Yeah. But we're playing this in the dormitory in the accommodation centers. That wasn't allowed. And one of the teachers is banging on the door, and I just said, look, just stay quiet, just stay quiet. But everybody bursts out laughing. And, so anyway, we get in there the next day. And I was the ringleader of this, bearing in mind. We get in the MTC the next day and President Robeson just goes crazy on us. He just like, you're meant to be missionaries, you're servants of the Lord now, you need to put away those childish behaviors. So I was thinking, do I kind of go up there and confess that I'm the ringleader to this? There wasn't really an opportunity, but as we were filing out, I was the last one to file out, and Sister Robeson got a hold of me and just said, we know you wouldn't have had anything to do with that last night. and that was, she only said that because of my parents, and the relationship that she had with them, is that President Deaconson couldn't possibly been involved in such scandalous behavior as playing cricket at midnight. And so I guess there was people in the stake who maybe just thought, well, it's President Deaconson, everything's all right with him.
Yeah, interesting. That's funny. Well, redemption's real. I'm sure that sin has been taken care of, right?
Just about, yeah.
Just about. And then there's so many directions I want to go, but you have a really interesting calling now, and we're gonna, let's just leave this as sort of groundwork, and then we'll bounce around with some principles and whatnot. But so you got released from the stake presidency, and you sort of think, man, and what's next, right? And so what happened, and tell us about your current calling. Yeah,
so released from the stake presidency, and clearly then there's rumors because the stake president was my bishop, and so there was clearly he wasn't going to carry on as bishop, and the usual cultural rumor mills kind of start and things like that. And, I remember hearing somebody say, I think it was Elder Johnson, who once said in response to a question, like, you've worked so hard, you served so hard all your years. Why do you do that? And he says, well, I made the decision when I got baptized. This is what I do. And I recognize that. It resonates with me, what he said there. So whatever calling came along, it came along, but I wasn't expecting the calling that did come along, which was about 4 weeks after the release. One of the 70 asked for a Zoom call with me and my wife. And we agreed to the Zoom call. We had the call, and there's a little bit of small talk, and he kind of, okay, get over this.
Yeah. Like, what's this about?
Yeah. And so he then said, we would like you to serve as a counselor on the Pageant Presidency. And I was like, okay, so what's that?
Yeah.
I'd been to...
And if for us Americans, if we missed, that's the pageant presidency. This isn't some presidency. Like unique city branch presidency, or not the pageant city. This is a pageant, right?
Pageant, the pageant. So it's the British pageant. There's only 3 pageants. And I think once people found out what I was doing, the first question was like, aren't pageants cancelled?
Yeah.
That was the first question that I would usually get. So that was about 4 weeks after I was released on the stake presidency that call came. And there's been a lot of interesting experiences during that time as well.
Yeah. And so maybe not too many people realize this, but there are 3 pageants that are still going on that are going to continue to go on, right? And those are which ones?
So the British pageant, the Nauvoo pageant, and the Mesa one.
Gotcha.
All others aren't supported and are discouraged from the church.
And so where does the English pageant take place?
That takes place on the site of the Preston Temple.
Okay. And how far is that from you?
From me, that's about 2.5 hour drive.
Okay.
The other members of the presidency, that's about a 5 hour drive for one and about an hour's drive for another.
Nice. So just maybe, I mean, most people, even myself sitting at lunch, I'd never really understood the dynamics of a pageant presidency member. So how would you articulate this calling to a Latter-day Saint audience?
Like, what does it start? Yeah. So I think the first thing to recognize is that myself and the other members of the presidency, we do not have a theatrical background at all. I think the last thing that I remember doing a road show.
Oh, perfect.
And I won Best Actor Award in 2002, I think it was, something like that. But that was it. That was the extent of any involvement. I'm not even musically minded. Love music, but can't play an instrument, can't sing. And the same with the rest of the presidency. They're better singers than I am, but that's about it. So it was more about providing spiritual leadership and allowing people who we would call as finance directors, creative directors, communications, empowering them to do their roles. And that was really fundamental to any success that we have had and will have in the calling.
Yeah. So how many weeks out of the year does the pageant actually take place?
So 2 weeks that it takes place. Those who are involved from a casting point of view, it will be the week prior to that as well. So effectively 3 solid weeks for those involved. They usually have, over the course of the 2 weeks, about 25,000 people will visit. The marquee holds about 2,000, so about 2,000 per performance.
Yeah.
But with it being on the temple site as well, Kurt, that's really quite unique in terms of the saints in the UK being able to gather in one area, and certainly the significance of gathering in the shadow of the temple is pretty special.
Now, I've been to the old Manti pageant, and there's a hill, and so it makes for a great sort of stage. Is it a similar setup that they're on a hill, or how does it work?
It's inside, and
okay.
Good reason for that. In England, it rains.
And you don't know when it's going to rain.
Exactly,
it's probably going to rain, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we do it in a marquee, and so there's a probably going to be a central stage audience on either side, almost like an amphitheater feel. And
is this like a theater built by the church that is for only the pageant? Or?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
We'll obviously, this will be the third pageant the British pageant has had.
Okay.
So
this is relatively new?
Yeah, it's relatively new.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Where the, Camorra and Manti's like since the beginning of time,
exactly,
I think.
Yeah. So this will be the third time it's been held in Britain. So it's pretty new from that perspective. So we've, a lot of the staging and even costumes and things have been stored. So we'll just reuse a lot of that.
Yeah. So are you the first part of the first presidency? That comes out where part of the very first of all presidencies that have actually done this for this pageant?
No. So there's been two more. So there's one 2014, one 2017.
Okay.
So that had separate presidencies for
Gotcha.
that as well. And the same structure exists for Mesa and Nauvoo. They would have separate pageant presidencies for those.
Gotcha.
We have limited contact with them, sometimes sharing a good practice and things, but limited contact.
Yeah. Now there's a lot of members of the church, maybe even local members, who think, why are we doing pageants? Like we are a church. We're not if people want to go see a play, there's wonderful options in London to go see a play. Right. So how would you summarize, like, what's the purpose or mission of these pageants or of your pageant?
Yeah, I think there's one key reason, and this is the reason why the brethren authorize them to take place. And you're right, there's people who just say, why are we doing this? There's so many needs that our members have and non-members have as well in the UK. Why are we, in their minds, putting on a show?
Right.
And I think I know it's a lot more than just that. And the reason the First Presidency have authorized this is for any other program, for any other activity that might be put on, is to bring souls to Christ.
Yeah.
This is just a vehicle. And I think those involved in the pageant, we need to clearly understand what that is, that this isn't something in and of itself, that this is purely just a vehicle to increase testimony, to increase faith, to increase family togetherness, and ultimately to bring souls to our Savior, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
If it's not that, then we've got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there like a clear, like formal process of obtaining referrals at the pageant? Like are the missionaries passing out referral cards or how does that work?
Again, it's something that you've got to be getting that fine balance of proselytizing and welcoming. So we were in the Family History Center in Salt Lake a few days ago. I think they do that really well. There's that balance there.
Yeah.
Nobody's coming along and asking you to, make any commitments for a visit or anything like that. So the missionaries are involved. So it'll be mainly the Manchester mission that they would be involved with this, and other missions in the UK as well.
And imagine for a missionary, it's a great, invite someone investigating the church. I mean, what a great opportunity. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And certainly for the locale in Preston as well, the local schools and community groups that exist there. So no is the answer, really, that we're not having missionaries there who are handing out, pass along cards and things, but certainly they are there ready to engage if the opportunity is there.
Yeah. And imagine even for a baptized member, a great spiritual uplifting opportunity to become closer to Jesus Christ through that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, we went as just audience members to the last two pageants. We absolutely loved it. But we didn't understand all the things that went on behind the scenes. We never really thought about that.
Yeah, it was just always there, and it works, right? Just like on Sunday we show up, it's like, oh, there's always sacrament bread and water, and
shares are out. Yeah,
it just works.
Yeah, it just happens. And we were that naive that of all the efforts and work that had gone into planning and hosting such a thing. So we enjoyed that as audience members, and I think, like what you say, Kurt, there's there's clearly members who will come. They'll bring family members who perhaps aren't active or are non-members themselves. And we need to not justify is the wrong word, but we need to look and actually, is this worthwhile? Is this really bringing people to the Savior? Mm-hmm. How you measure that is quite difficult. Do you get them just to, punch a happy face sign on the way out? That's not really going to do it. So,
is there anything you do to measure that or measure anything?
Yeah, that's close engagement with the mission. The Manchester mission.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, leadership feedback and what have you as well, that would need to come through the stakes afterwards, during and after. So we'd need to look at that. And the brethren are keen. They've used this word transformational. And is this going to be something that is transformational? Or is this just going to be something that's just another thing that might be heavy on resource and cost and things like that?
So I got to underscore that leadership principle there. What a great question to ask with, it's like we do the chili cook-off every year. And maybe let's sit down this year and say, is this really transformational? And either is there something else we can do, or what can we do to make sure it is transformational rather than, people just seem to like it, so let's just do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's a balance there because we've got to respect what great work previous pageant presidencies have done, and they did. Absolutely fantastic. And we're building on the legacy that they've left there as well. But that word does keep coming through in our presidency meetings and in our board meetings, transformational. Yeah. And that again resonates with me, just thinking, why are we doing this? Yeah. Is this real? Is this something that we should be making more is what we're doing there? Is that going to be transformational? I remember sitting in a business seminar years ago, and there was an Olympic rower athlete there, and they would often ask the question, if somebody had an idea, well, will it make the boat go faster? That was the question. And if it didn't, they didn't entertain it. Yeah. If it did, and even if it was something unique, it was strange or it was a bit obscure, but it made the boat go faster, then let's do it. Yeah. And I think it's the same thing that we try and engage with as a leadership team is this going to be transformational? Will this have a key impact? What kind of impact will that have? If not, then let's just park it. Let's not do it. Or maybe we need to address it another time because we're not seeing it from the right perspective. But it's got to be transformational. Yeah. And it sounds like it is reaching that mark to some extent, and you're keep going. Right? Certainly for me, it's been transformational, this journey. Yeah. And I think I can speak on behalf of the other presidency members and know that it's been transformational for them as well. Yeah. For those that have been involved in previous pageants, they kind of like nod, kind of like, we know this is transformational, and kind of pat us on the head and thinking, don't get too excited because we just know this is special. And we're learning that. Yeah. And what's the, in like 2 minutes or less, what's like the plot or the story that's told during the pageant? Yeah. So the story effectively is the missionaries visiting the UK, and it's set in the Preston area as well, predominantly. So Heber C. Kimball plays a key role in the pageant. It leads through and it shows some of the reformers, so Martin Luther and Tyndale and these characters very briefly, but it leads into then the missionaries arriving on the shores of the UK, and then the first baptisms that took place and the stories around that, and everything's taken from individual journals as well, because you've got to be careful when putting something together like this. Thankfully, this wasn't my task. We've got unbelievable talented individuals involved in this, and it's a musical, right? So, no, it's not. Okay. It's not a musical. It's there's one hymn at the end, Redeemer of Israel, which I've never heard sang like you hear the pageant cast and choir sing this. It's phenomenal. And is it? I think the Manti pageant. It's so large, and that it was like dubbed over, so the characters would pretend like they're speaking, but they're not really speaking. But this is live, purely live. Yeah, cool. It's purely live, and so it's focusing on maybe 2 or 3 families and taking things from their journals. Clearly, there's no added dramatization on that. Some timings might be, but from a doctrinal perspective and from a historical perspective, this has got to be right. So, similar to the Saints books that are coming out, they really try and not, get out of bounds of the history, what the history says, right? Yeah. And my understanding with Saints is it's quite similar, in that they had to have the historians, qualified historians, but they also had a creative team. Yeah, that's cool. And it's, I guess, the same where we are concerned. Nice. And then how long does it last? About an hour. Just over an hour. And I'm not doing any spoilers in this, but there's a special time, and I'm not necessarily an emotional person, but when I was at the previous 2 pageants, there's a moment at the end, the last 2 or 3 minutes, where tears are shed by most people who are in there.
Wow.
It's a pretty powerful experience.
That's cool. And then did you say like the Nauvoo pageant does the same story every other day during their pageant?
Yeah.
Is that right?
So that's my understanding, is that it's, I'm not sure if it's every other day, but certainly it's interspersed with the traditional Nauvoo pageant.
Okay.
But they also have the British pageant.
Gotcha. So if people have seen the British pageant in Nauvoo, you've seen the same production.
Exactly.
But yours is better. Let's be honest. Of
course. Yeah. different setting and what have you as well. Like, it's in the shadow of the Preston Temple, which is, nice. I think is very special.
Nice.
We do have some of the same people who are involved in the Nauvoo pageant involved in ours as well, in the UK. And even applications for people who want to be involved, volunteer, and be part of the cast.
Yeah, and that's a unique dynamic that you don't, choose who to call to these callings. You take applications, right? So.
Yeah, that is a unique dynamic. Yeah. So we've got as a structure, we've got a board of directors who we called and we set apart, and I think there's 8 of them. And then people who are reporting into them, there's all kinds of volunteers of health and safety and security and accommodation and family liaison and things like this. But typically for the core cast, there is people who are applying for this. They will be also set apart by their local bishops if they're going to be involved for the duration of the pageant timeline. And so they won't be released from, if they're serving on a bishopric or, Relief Society presidency or something like that, they won't be released, because this will just be for a short period of time. But they are still set apart from their bishops to do this. So you'll have a number of applications coming through.
How many do you have a rough number?
For the core cast, I think for the core cast, so that this is going to be people with lines in the script, a named character. I think there's about 150 for that.
And how many named characters are there?
I think there is about 20.
Okay.
So there's going to be, again, I'm saying think. It just shows that I'm kind of hands off here. We've got people who can
what are you doing there
exactly? Yeah. Well, it's funny you mention that, because we, at the same time I was called, my nephew, who's just a few years younger than I am, was called to serve as bishop in my home ward. And he had this thought of, wow, okay, so I'm called as a bishop now. I'm going to be dealing with people with all kinds of issues, marriage breakups, pornography addictions, and pretty serious things. And then he turned and he says, but John, I guess you're just putting on a show. And so nice. It was said tongue in cheek, and that was funny. Taken in good faith. But again, that's going back to what you said about perception. That is a perception that some people may have. So we just put on a show. We've got all kinds of needs here in the UK, like we have in every other country in the world. But we're putting on a show. And I guess it's just that understanding of this is a vehicle to bring souls to the Savior and bring them closer to heaven. So
applications are coming in for both the main parts, the lead parts, I don't know if you call them, and then the ensemble or whatever that would be.
So applications have come in. So we would have some of our board members would strategically place themselves around the UK. So a lot of traveling that they would go to, and they would just do it at stake centres in Ireland, in Scotland, in the south of England, the north of England.
Like Midlands. Tryouts type thing? Or?
Yeah. So these would be people who would just come along randomly. So they're effectively tryouts. They would be given parts of the script. They would read through the script, and then they would be shortlisted. And so invited for our callbacks. And then we had a central location for the callbacks people to come. And that was a special experience in and of itself. So we as a presidency were there. The callbacks are scheduled, and the pageant is happening in August 2022. And everybody's there and are all excited. And these people who are turning up for the callbacks, these are already engaged. So this is the type of audience that you don't have to say a great deal for them just to be like loving what you're saying, which is really nice. And so they just love the gospel, they love the Lord, and they love being involved in the pageant, because they have in some cases been involved previously or certainly heard about it and how effective it can be for them in their lives. So we have the callbacks, and then from the callbacks, the team will get together. They'll look at all the things that creative people do, the projecting the voice correctly, and all those things that I don't really understand.
Right. In fact, they'd appreciate if you stood out of the room while they did that.
Well, it's a funny thing, Kurt, because they have that. And but as a presidency, we effectively have to approve that as, I guess, the ecclesiastical leaders of the pageant. But when we've got people like Alex Mackenzie Johns and people like Sue Arnold and people like Rachel Pratt who are involved and know the pageant and the script inside out and what the characters need to look like, sound like, and be like, then, that's, we rely on their judgment massively. Another great leadership, like just empowering those according to their abilities and the talents that they have, and not getting in there and mudding up the waters, right? Yeah, I think that's my view on leadership generally, is they're called. Yeah. They're called. So allow them to fulfill their calling. And clearly it's probably a little bit easier to do this because these are also in their personal lives, professional people in what they do from a creative point of view. So it's a little bit easier to place trust in people who are so talented in those areas. They know exactly what they need. If these were just some random people we'd called, perhaps that trust wouldn't be there, but that same principle needs to exist, doesn't it, in leadership? That empowerment of let's call somebody because of all the talents, the gifts that they might have, and the revelation that might have been received, but then not allow them to function in that calling. That drives me crazy when I hear or see that. Yeah. And so you know what? In mistakes, I'm sure they'll be the first to admit. I'm not aware of any, but they'll probably look back and think they've made some errors themselves. We certainly have as a presidency. But that's all part of it. Yeah. That's all part of the growth. That's all part of the experience that we have. Yeah. But we rely on them heavily. One of the key things actually, Kurt, was when it was announced on, I was going to say LDS.org, Church of Jesus Christ.org, we as a presidency, and it was put on the UK Facebook page and things. There was some comments that were coming on. Oh, okay. So the presidency, 3 white males, here we go again, type of thing. Right. And when I looked at that, I didn't even think of that. And I thought, does the presidency really need to be, male, firstly? Can this not be a female presidency? And so it was like the word mission leader or Sunday school presidency, that's sort of been the ongoing debate. Yeah. Like, does this really have to be a priesthood calling? Exactly, yeah. So there's no keys involved as a presidency. Those that have called us, yes. But with us, no. So why can't this just be a female presidency? And they'll probably do a better job than we certainly would. And so, that came up. And it wasn't until I looked in a little bit more detail as to maybe why is that necessarily the case? But during the pageant workshops and during that time, we'll preside and conduct sacrament meetings. There'll be other involvement with other priesthood leaders that would require priesthood involvement, as it were, priesthood holder involvement. But I get that's a valid point, and that might well change in the future. I don't know. I would certainly sustain that if it did happen. But right now, this is the direction they're going. But this is what it is, and also, it's good to be mindful of that. The detail of this, the hard work of this, the creative aspect, decision-making processes, these are mainly done by these talented females and males that we have as members of the board and other members of the team. But it's written by a female. It's effectively rolled out. It's produced. It's we take their lead in a lot of cases, let me tell you. So, but this is a full-time year-round calling. So most people think, well, the pageant's over. Like, what do you do now? Yeah. So that's one of the things, Kurt. This one isn't over. It was scheduled for August 2022. And I think it was back in March. So I mentioned before about the callbacks. So we had all the people come to a central location. And I can't remember how many people were there, but there's a good number of people there. And we filled the hall in the Midlands in the UK. And we found out on that Friday night that this is going to be postponed. And we've clearly, like I said before, we've got this engaged people there. They're ready and they are so on fire and ready to. And this is when this passed? So this is just March, just gone. Oh, okay. In March, okay. Yeah. And the reason that it was postponed, there was just a number of things that were just really is creating a perfect storm for the need for this to be postponed. Clearly, it's a European pageant as well. It's known as the British pageant, but it's the only one in Europe. Yeah. Ukraine obviously started, unfortunately, kicking off. We had a cost of living crisis, which is still ongoing in the UK and most parts of the world, I believe, where the cost of things like fuel and every household goods has just rocketed. So families are under pressure, under strain. And also because of COVID, there was a number of activities, especially for the youth, that were postponed, but then are all happening at the same time. So it created this storm that we had to look at it, as passionate as we were about taking this on, thinking, do we need to postpone this for maximum impact and sensitivities as well? So we made the decision, we kind of put this to the area presidency and said, look, this is something that we may need to reevaluate. And they agreed.
Yeah.
But with it already being authorized from the first presidency, then we just said, look, it's not cancelled. It is clearly, we just changed the date.
Okay.
So that momentum still exists, that feeling should still exist. But that was hard news to break to a lot of those people who certainly made summer plans with family and relatives and say, actually, this isn't happening anymore.
Yeah.
But next year it
So was it supposed to happen in July?
So it was meant to happen in the first 2 weeks of August.
Okay, gotcha.
So now it's just happened in the first 2 weeks of August of 2023.
Okay. So you postponed it 1 year and
yeah.
Same applications apply. You just
clearly we wanted to continue on rather than this is a whole new pageant. We wanted to continue on that momentum that had already been built. So those callbacks on that day absolutely counted. So the core cast was still selected from that. It just means they've got a lot more time to learn the lines.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to continue on as normal. There'll obviously be some tweaks there along the way to make this. And we're always evaluating that transformational aspect. But it just continues on. It's just been postponed for a year.
Nice. And do people apply from all over the world or?
Yeah. So predominantly in the UK, because that's where the word goes out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've had applications from here in the US. I think there was a few in Europe as well. And a lot of the time it's like a family cast. And these people will often come in and it's their vacation, their holiday. They'll come to England, they'll camp out for 2 weeks. It's like Zion's camp.
Yeah.
They'll camp out for 2 weeks and they'll be involved in the rehearsals for the pageant and their whole family's there. It's very family orientated. So they will have young children in the cast and the family cast and the ensemble. And so, yeah, people love being involved in it. And that was one thing I just didn't grasp, that one of the presidency mentioned that this is, he found out that the pageant was the best kept secret in the church.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other secrets, but they're not a secret if we don't know about them. So, and I get that because those who are involved just need to be involved again and have such a desire and have such a burning testimony of the pageant itself, which is really good, really positive, and we need people like that. But there's a danger to that as well in terms of a deeper testimony and what that needs to be founded on. And I'm not saying that these people don't have that foundational testimony of the Saviour and the divinity of his work, and it's just based on the pageant. I'm sure it's not the case.
Yeah.
It can be a danger of something that is so effective, so transformational for them that just sits there in the pageant every 4 years.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
It becomes about the pageant, not what the pageant is meant to be about.
Exactly,
right?
which is just like I said before, just a vehicle. That's all that this is. As good as it is just a vehicle like any other thing in the churches.
Yeah. So in a 12-month period, how many people are actually involved between the cast, the board of directors, everybody?
Everybody, yeah. So you're looking at about 850, 900 volunteers.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, you can imagine when you're having that many people every day, about 2,000 people coming on site every day, there's got to be protocols, there's got to be health and safety, all those fun things.
Yeah.
And so we've got to make sure we're doing things right. And then leading up to that from an engagement piece with the local community and again across the UK, not just internally within the church, but externally from a missionary perspective as well. So yeah, we've got to make sure all those things are tied up. So it's not just that 850, 900 volunteers. There's obviously other people on top of that, like the church's PR department, the church's missionary department, and anybody else.
Yeah. And so if you're not the creative type, you're not in the, you're not standing. I don't like how you said that line. Redo it. You're not doing any of that.
I mean, and obviously there's the decisions like, do we postpone or not, or that you're definitely involved in, but what else do you do? Like as that formal presidency there?
Yeah. We just sit back and go out for meals every now and again. No, so it's very easy to get involved in the detail of these things. But we have people who are called to do that, to do the detail. Fundamentally, our role is to provide spiritual leadership for the pageant. Yes, to make sure that everybody is safe and that everybody has a good time, and everybody who comes along and enjoys it as well. But how do we make that transformation from a spiritual point of view? So there's a lot of, it's a wrong word because it sounds like a business word, but strategic work, if you know what I mean by that, in terms of what we do there, to make this the most positive experience. Because it isn't just people turning up, seeing a show and leaving. How do we make it that it isn't that? Both for people, the 900 involved in that this is a transformation experience for them to go home with, and this is a renewal for them. But then also everybody who's going to come, those 2,000 people or so a day as well. So it's evaluating that, hopefully measuring that in the best possible way as well. Yes, there'll be some things that we need to authorize. We'll see some gaps that we need to call certain individuals. And again, we'll approach bishops and stake presidents about availability for those things. So we would get involved in a lot of that aspect. And I guess we're there also as a bit of a face to the pageant as well, as an interface to the area presidency, who obviously interface directly with the Quorum of the 12 for that. So it's pretty varied. The last call that I was on, I think it sounds really boring, but we were looking at everybody that applies, by the way, we want them to have some kind of involvement within the pageant. It's pretty harsh for those who apply. And this is the dynamic that you talked about earlier on. It's really interesting that where do you have people apply for a calling and then say, no, like a job interview almost, then say, you're not successful, but you are. And that's based purely on their interpretation of the character or their talent for that particular role. And that doesn't really happen in the church, does it?
Yeah.
Unless you turn up when a stake reorganization is taking place on a Saturday and see some of these guys posturing.
Yeah, it does happen, yeah.
But otherwise, it's pretty unique. And it's just ensuring that those areas of having tactful conversations are taking place, and that there is still some level of involvement for those people who may not have been successful in applying for a core cast role. Yeah. So it's an interesting dynamic.
So when someone is chosen for the cast, does your presidency extend that calling, or does it come through their local leaders?
So no, so they will have had engagement through the organization with usually the creative director and the producers. Okay. So that would be through them. Then we would get all the core cast together, and then we'd have a meeting with them. And again, it's what has fascinated me with this is that everything has been done in a spiritual type of way. When I say that sounds really cliched, it sounds really broad, but we like to set those foundations of why is it we're doing these things? What's the spiritual purpose? What's the purpose of all of these things? So even when we have our meetings, I've never had spiritual thoughts that go on for like 45 minutes, but that's setting the foundation, that's setting the platform for this meeting. That might just be 25 minutes, half an hour long, but our spiritual thought and setting that foundation has been really key. Usually in ward councils and state councils and things, it's, somebody gives a random 5-minute thing from their personal study and we move on. This has been quite different for me, is that we really try and set out these key principles through doctrine, through a spiritual lens, rather than just getting into the meat and the thick of things. Yeah. And I think that's been something that's been a big learn for me. It's really easy to get involved in the detail, really easy.
I bet.
And get lost in all of that.
Yeah. So when someone is chosen, they maybe get an email or message from some of the directors and the cast casting people,
Yeah.
right? And if they get a no, they just you send out a bunch of no emails and say, sorry, try again next year?
We try not to use email. We try not to use that.
Okay.
That personal aspect of it is as important, we feel. But again, we still want them to have some level of involvement. They've got something to offer, and they want to offer. I don't think that it's anybody's role to say, you're not really for us. Right. There's something for everybody to do here. If it means we've got to find something, then we'll find it.
So if they're not a role in the actual play, maybe you'll find another volunteer role that they can still participate in the pageant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice.
And it's pretty competitive, these people who are now that core cast, again, I'm not an expert, but from what I have seen, they wouldn't be out of place in a professional theatre. And performing in the West End and on Broadway in Chicago or something, Yeah. So yeah.
And I imagine you do get some talent that are top notch that could perform or have performed on the West End. Is that?
Yeah. I think we have done certainly, whether it's professional or amateur, certainly have a good standard, have a high standard. That from my point of view, doesn't look out of place at all. Certainly the last pageant that I was at, I was blown away at the talent of effectively what our volunteers, they're not paid for doing this at all. They just love being part of it, and seeing them perform in that way. I've been to West End productions, and from the untrained eye, this was the same.
Yeah. I believe it for sure. And I got to get out there to see it. So
yeah, you're more than welcome to. And I think Alex, who does who has done a lot of professional performance in theatres, she said how we rehearse with these guys in such a short time frame that if she was to bring some of her professional friends to see the pageant, and then for her to turn to them afterwards and say they only had this time frame to rehearse, they wouldn't believe it.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's, again, the Lord plays a part in this as well. And he is involved in the detail of this, perhaps where we as a presidency sometimes aren't. We've seen great examples of how he is involved in that. And so, I have always found that interesting, how from a professional point of view and from this cutthroat type of view that professionals might have, that we've got to get this done,
especially in the theater.
I can imagine it's pretty intense. That we haven't taken that approach, but at the same time, we've been able to put on something that's just as spectacular.
Yeah, that's special. Awesome. Any other principle or concept or story that comes to mind with related to the pageant that?
And then working together as a presidency. Again, that's reflective of working as a stake presidency as well. We're from different backgrounds. I didn't know the other members of the presidency at all. We'd never met before. I think one of us had been at the same wedding before, and that was it. But there's no background there. So we've all coming kind of fresh, not knowing each other and how each other work, and trying to figure those things out. And so that's been pretty interesting. And that was the opposite of that, serving in the state presidency, of people that I knew and how to work that dynamic a little bit easier. But I think what we've allowed to do is allowed the Lord in that presidency, and that's been really positive. Yeah. And I always feel sometimes, and I'll be honest now, I've said this to the other guys in the presidency, that, tonight it's a nice sunny day and it's a lovely evening, and I'm sitting here on a Zoom call. Do I really want to be here? It isn't until those times that we spend together as a presidency that, I do want to be there. And the things that I'm able to learn from them and the feeling that exists, I didn't think that would happen on a Zoom call, but it does for us. And it's been a pretty special time, and getting that dynamic where we're brothers, we feel like we are brothers together, us as a presidency, and all experienced men, they all know what they're doing a lot more than I do. And it's been a pretty special time to serve with them. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love, at the end of the day, some of those callings are just the camaraderie you feel, the brotherhood, the unity. Maybe you didn't accomplish anything grandiose or impressive, but just to be part of a community, especially in a leadership capacity, it really feeds the soul. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I think just agreeing on those things of moving forward with things like this isn't just a show. This is a vehicle to to greater and better things. And that's been an important aspect of is really just stripping away all of these things to ensure that, are we delivering the Lord's pageant? This is his pageant. Or, you're serving on a bishopric, this is the Lord's ward. Or a stake, this is the Lord's stake. How do we ensure it stays that way?
Yeah.
And it's not ours. And that's difficult to do sometimes, because we get so passionate, we get so engaged in what we're doing. We've got our own mindsets. And I know I have, I've got my own way of thinking, and thankfully I've got a wife that corrects that a lot. And I'm sure other people will have spouses who do the same thing, but it's really easy for this to become something about you or what your feelings and thoughts are. And I think that's a key part of any leadership calling, really, is taking that step back and understanding, okay, so you might even have keys as a bishop or a stake president. You've got keys. But does that mean that this is still what the Lord's decision would be? Or is it just based on your opinion because you have keys?
Right. Yeah.
So it's getting that balance right, and always understanding, and not just understanding, but interpreting the promptings and the feelings of the Spirit when you seek them.
Yeah. Oh, that's powerful for sure. All right. So make your communications committee proud here. If people, promote the pageant, obviously it's next August, 2023.
Yeah.
If people want to know more about it, where they go, should they plan their vacation around it? Why should they invite their family and friends, their neighbors, maybe, Latter-day Saints or not?
Yeah. So it's the first 2 weeks of August, 2023, and definitely plan your family around. I think one of the reasons to maybe bring family, it's pretty non-threatening.
Yeah.
And it's also enjoyable. So the team have gone to lengths to ensure that this is something that can be engaging for all. There's no Mormon speak, there's no proselytizing that goes on there. Nobody's identified of who is a member here and who isn't a member here. So it is very, very transparent. It's very open. And the feedback from previous pageants, when I've read through those from non-members, it's pretty powerful reading. And so yeah, it's worth the travel. Even if you're in a different country, it's worth the travel. And it isn't just for the hour that's on there. There's things that are going on beforehand. So obviously this is set in the middle of the 19th century. So people are dressed like that. It's almost like an outdoor exhibition almost. And there's different games that are going on, and a band that's playing from the time and the era.
Great atmosphere.
Great atmosphere, especially if it's not raining. And that's a big if. But there's, and we're looking to have engagement from the family history department, to have discovery experiences taking place there as well. So yeah, it's, I think for all ages and for all walks of life, it's definitely something that you should look to, and see if you can get across and enjoy it.
Yeah. Does the church have like a website with all the details and things, or no?
Yeah, there is a website. It's britishpageant.co.uk. I think I got that right.
But we'll put it in the show notes just in case.
So britishpageant.co.uk, and on there, that's where everybody applied for and everything as well. But that'll be updated. So ticketing and things like that. Ticketing hasn't been released yet. That'll be released closer at the time. But yeah, you can find anything that you need to about the story, what that's about the fire of our faith, and details and mapping around where it's at.
Okay. So this suddenly entered my mind. I remember as a youth going to the Manti pageant, and there's like two things I remember. One was, the actual pageant, and the other thing was like the quote unquote anti-Mormons that were like outside, like calling us to repentance. Do you get much of that?
Yeah. So again, this is just the first time that I've been in the presidency, but from the last time, reading through and speaking to some people who were involved, that was happening. And I loved the approach that we had. There was a mission couple from the Manchester mission, and that was their job, just to kind of,
make sure they didn't get out of control.
Yeah. And bearing in mind, this is going on for 2 weeks as well. So kind of day one in week one, there was a little bit of more hostility. These people were pretty fired up about it, so they're outside and they're protesting. I don't know exactly what the subject of the protest was, but they would go out and just take them hot chocolate. It was raining, they would take them umbrellas. And by the end of the 2, these were just friends. They were just friends. And I don't know if these people just walked away all confused or frustrated or actually enjoyed the experience themselves. But this couple, I don't know their names. I wish I knew who they were, but they led this
the effort of,
And I just thought that's such a good way of doing it, because I've seen other times where people have gone and been challenging to them or ignoring them. And I think neither of those are right. But this approach was ministering, right?
Yeah.
They just went along and they just looked after them. They were outside all day long, so, somebody's outside all day long, despite what they were doing, they went and gave them umbrellas. And I'm pretty sure if that was me, I'd have just been confused. Why are these people doing this?
Right. Yeah.
But
that's cool.
Yeah, that was a good approach.
That's awesome. I'm glad I asked. All right. Last question I have is, as you reflect on your time in the stake presidency and also in this, in the pageant presidency, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, that's such a deep and meaningful and personal question as well. I think for me is that there was times where we just couldn't do, or I couldn't do what was possible. If I just purely relied on myself, then it would inevitably have fallen apart. It wouldn't have been what the Lord intended. This would have just been John's talk or John's interview or whatever it was. But having that reliance on the Lord Jesus Christ enabled me even to really sit with individuals, evaluate where they're at, how can I help and be a servant to them, rather than them being a servant to me. And often we would have people who would come along and say, we've came along to this activity tonight because we want to support the stake. No, you don't. We don't want that. We want you to come along and be part of it because it's transformational for you. There's an impact for you. Don't come if that's the motivation. And so how has it allowed me to become a better savior of Jesus Christ? I think it's allowed me to inspect internally, a bit of introspection as to all aspects of my life. And being a leader has allowed me to really stay on my toes as well. It's, when people sometimes say, I don't know where I would have been if it wasn't for the church. And I think from a leadership perspective, I'm not sure. But it's certainly strengthened my faith in the Lord, because I didn't really have anywhere else to go. When I when I gave my testimony, when I was released from the stake presidency, I said that there'd been two constants during this time. One was my wife, because she was always there, no matter what, during those times. And there were some difficult times as well. And the second one was the Savior. The times that I felt that he may have left me, in hindsight, you look back and think, yeah, that was for a purpose. That was just for you to figure this out by yourself, John. And that growth was to come from within, rather than completely relying on him who was mighty to save. And in hindsight, it's a wonderful thing when you look back at these things and you don't realize the learning that's taken place or the closeness that's taken place with him at that time until you look back and realize. I think it's also key for any leader, Kurt, that when they look back, it's really easy to think, did I really make a difference? Was there any real impact? We don't get, a survey at the end. How did President Deacon do here? How did this guy do in their call? You just move on, don't you? You just get on with it. And you don't really look for that. I would just say that for those people who may have felt like that the Lord knows and the Lord qualifies, and he qualifies maybe even those thoughts and feelings. And as you move on, those learns do come in time and in temperance and in the Lord's time.
And that concludes this How I Lead interview. I hope you enjoyed it. And I would ask you, could you take a minute and drop this link in an email, on social media, in a text, wherever it makes the most sense, and share it with somebody who could relate to this experience. And this is how we develop as leaders, just hearing what the other guy's doing, trying some things out, testing, adjusting for your area. And that's where great leadership's discovered, right? So we would love to have you share this with somebody in this calling or a related calling, and that would be great. And also, if you know somebody, any type of leader who would be a fantastic guest on the How I Lead segment, reach out to us. Go to leadingsaints.org/contact. Maybe send this individual an email letting them know that you're going to be suggesting their name for this interview. We'll reach out to them and see if we can line them up. So again, go to leadingsaints.org/contact, and there you can submit all the information and let us know. And maybe they will be on a future How I Lead segment on the Leading Saints podcast. Remember, to learn more about our Gathering Saints retreat experiences, visit leadingsaints.org/gathering or click the link in the show notes.
It came as a result of the position of leadership which was imposed upon us by the God of heaven, who brought forth a restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when the declaration was made concerning the only true and living church upon the face of the earth, we were immediately put in a position of loneliness. The loneliness of leadership, from which we cannot shrink nor run away, and to which we must face up with boldness and courage and ability.